Healthcare is changing, and Dr. Nancy RN is here for you. The topics are many, but each program stands on its own with 3 key action points for you to learn. Your guide to a healthier you in a changing world. Dr. Nancy RN.
Welcome to Dr. Nancy RN, Healthy You, Healthy Nation, Healthy World. I'm Nancy Valentine, PhD and registered nurse. And this show is dedicated to you, the healthcare consumer. And we are really honored today to have a special guest that's going to tell us about a community that you want to really get to know and something that may help you someday in your journey to wellness. So I'd like to really introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Connie Carino, and I'll tell you a little bit about Connie and her background. And she is going to be talking with us today about her journey of leadership. She is a leader in action par excellence, and she was able to establish a community for cancer patients. And let me tell you a bit about her background and how she came to do that. Dr. Carino has a broad range of experience. She is a nurse PhD as well, and she has worked in higher education, hospital administration, and she's been an executive and founder of a nonprofit organization, and she's done a great deal of consultation work. She was then, after working with cancer patients for many years, really challenged and became interested in the work of the wellness community, which is now called the Cancer Support Community. And she formed a nonprofit board, founded the Philadelphia chapter, and served as their executive director. This organization is really something to take note of. They have served thousands of cancer patients in Philadelphia, and they have their home in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia. But, you know, again, Connie didn't wake up one morning and just say, I think I'm going to start a wellness community. You know, it was a journey. So I asked her to sort of give us some highlights about how she started on that journey. And this is what she wrote, and then she'll give us her full story. She was one day sitting on a mountaintop in Tuscany, Italy. Don't we wish we were there? And she was reading Gilda Radner's book, where she describes her cancer experience, Gilda Radner that is, in the book, It's Always Something. And Connie was sitting alongside Dean of Nursing, Claire Fagan, who was a really major figure in Philadelphia nursing. At the time, she was the Dean of the School of Nursing at the University of Pennsylvania. And she was talking with Claire about having an idea as to how to better serve patients in Philadelphia. Because this is really why she sort of got started on this. She had talked for many years about the psychological and emotional responses to serious illness. Then she lost a sister to cancer, and then she found out that she herself had cancer. So she was musing on this mountaintop in Tuscany, Italy, and saying to Claire, I think it's time to bring a wellness community to Philadelphia. And she's going to tell us what a wellness community even is. And Claire, knowing Claire, said, then do it. So she said she felt especially well qualified to undertake this challenge because it was both a professional and a personal journey. But she didn't really realize until she got started just how hard it was going to be to get it going, to do the fundraising, and then to find a group of concerned citizens to then help to establish it permanently as a viable nonprofit. So that's where the journey began, and now she's going to tell us where it's going and where it has gone and where it will be going in the future. Welcome, Connie. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us today.
It's so nice to be here with you, Nancy.
Thank you. Well, tell us, we'd love to hear about the food in Tuscany, Italy, and all the rest of the journey, but since that was your muse,
yes,
and that moment of spark, then what happened?
Well, you know, it didn't come from the air. In my professional life, I had really been very fortunate in my master's program to participate in one of the first community mental health centers that existed. President Kennedy had passed the Community Mental Health Centers Act, and the belief was that the community were going to take care of the patients and it was time to close down the great big mental hospitals. So I went to Colorado and studied with Maxwell Jones, who was the author of the book Therapeutic Community. And the whole idea of that is that people can get well if they have community support.
Now, is this different than going to a doctor, a psychiatrist, or a psychologist, or a psychiatric nurse clinician? This is just people can help one another.
People can help one another, but everybody in the community attends most of the activities. So all of the psychiatrists, the nurses, the social workers create a community, a healing, healthy community.
I see.
And you know, out of that came this word wellness, because before that word didn't really exist. There was medical illness, but people didn't talk about wellness. So a lot of the self-help groups, Synanon and many other groups, really the foundation of that came out of this idea of building a therapeutic community where everybody participates in getting well.
Interesting.
It is very interesting, and for some people should go back. Maxwell Jones was a British psychiatrist. So many wonderful things that have happened in health have come from England. But so I did that, got my master's degree, and ultimately the PhD, and came to Penn. And I was always interested in this group work and forming groups that where people of like conditions or like situations would come together. The first group I did at the hospital was a group of oncology nurses, because of the burdens that they have caring for cancer patients. Many of them talk about not being able to sleep at night, having nightmares, and finally to have a place where they could share this. Okay. So I created a psychiatric nursing consultation liaison service at the hospital at the University of Pennsylvania, so that patients and families would have the benefits of these well-educated nurses, and they would begin to have group meetings, family and patient meetings. And it was, so I was building on something. Healthcare was changing. It was very difficult. I had administrative responsibilities, but there was something bubbling. Something was beginning to happen.
Because you saw people responding to this.
Absolutely. And then my sister was diagnosed, and I saw her isolation. She would go to the oncologist, she would have chemotherapy, but there really wasn't any outreach to the family, and there wasn't any outreach, frankly, to her. So I became her support system, going back and forth between Philadelphia and New York, and she finally, she lived for 12 years, and for the state of the science at that particular time, that was very good. But
you played a role. You played a role in that, I'm sure.
Well, it was really keeping the family together, because the family was just destroyed. Because in the 70s, when somebody had breast cancer, it was a death sentence.
That's true.
I remember when my father called to tell me that my sister had breast cancer, and I could just hear it in his voice that it was over. It was really over. So I knew I had a lot of work to do there, plus I just loved my sister passionately, and really helped her, I think, finally come to a place where she could transition into the next life, because it was a very different time, Nancy. So less than 2 years later, I was diagnosed.
With the same kind of cancer?
With the same kind of cancer, the same kind of cell, the same kind of everything. And I thought, ye gads, what am I going to do? The answer to me always has been, stay as busy as you can. Everybody has a different path that they take when they have a serious illness, and for me it was probably a whole lot of denial, and if I just keep working real hard, then maybe this thing will go away.
It obviously worked. How many years ago was that?
Oh my God, it's 27 years, Nancy.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Tell us the rest of the secret.
Well, I do think it was there was a different science. There had been such an advancement. Now we're in the late 80s when I was diagnosed, and I had such a wonderful team at Penn that took care of me and saved my life.
Wonderful.
So it was 3 years later that Claire Fagan, and I have to tell the audience that they should be so proud of this Philadelphia dean, who became the acting president of the University of Pennsylvania, the first woman in the Ivy League system to be a president. And she really, practically all the Ivy Leagues have women presidents.
But also the first nurse.
And the first, and
Right.
do you know the nursing faculty were always so tickled at just the thought that the dean of the School of Medicine reported to a nurse. So it was.
How long did that last?
Oh, she was only there for a year, but that year we were also rated #1 by U.S. News and World Report for
That
the
was a
best
very
school
nice
of nursing.
compliment.
So we were very full of
Right,
ourselves.
right.
So Claire had asked me to go to Italy with her on some World Health Organization business, and I was 3 years out of my diagnosis, and so I tucked Gilda Radner's book because I had heard about this new organization out on the West Coast called the Wellness Community. So I read it, and I was just absolutely, the relief. Gilda ultimately succumbed to cancer, but the relief that she got was at the Wellness Community.
And so she described that in her book.
Absolutely, defined it. It really, it was life, not life-saving, but life-energizing for her.
Life-giving.
Life-giving. So I said, you know, I had that conversation with Claire, and I went out to California for 3 weeks. And I sat in a group, and for the very first time, I said, my name is Connie Carino, and I have breast cancer. And that was the first time I had ever said those words in a group of people.
How did it feel?
It was such a relief. It was such a relief because everybody was nodding. Everybody knew exactly what I was. But it was telling my story. And that's part of what the wellness community is all about, where everybody has the opportunity to tell their story in a group of people who know what you're talking about.
Right, they can empathize.
And they get it.
Right.
After that comes ideas, suggestions, and so forth. Now, the key philosophical element in the wellness community is that it is a group, it is a place where people go expecting to survive.
Which was different.
Very
was
different.
Very different translation.
And because in the mission statement it said fighting for recovery. There are some pros and cons to that because people who don't succeed, have they failed? Okay, so, and that was a place where they said that the only expert was the patient.
So it was really the very patient-centered approach.
Exactly. The expert was the patient. And so when we talk about advocacy, when we talk about putting the patient at the center of the system, you really have to believe and understand that the patient is the expert because it's happening to them and it's in their body. It doesn't mean that they understand all the scientific research. It doesn't mean that they understand all the medical diagnoses, but it is happening to them, and they're the best person to tell you about what's going on.
Well, tell the audience how that's different, similar and different from what was happening in the inpatient. I mean, there's the formal healthcare system, and then there was this, which was really a grassroots effort.
Well, it was, there are competing forces in established systems about who is going to be the leader of the team. And there are certain requisites. In emergencies, we know that there has to be a captain of the ship, right? But imagine thinking about the patient being the captain of the ship.
Right, that's not the usual approach.
That is not. And so it took a lot of thinking about that. And in those days, anybody who belonged to community groups, and there was suggestions of crystals and beads and fuzzy thinking, but I believed it. I said, yes, that's what's missing. That's what's missing. Absolutely devoted to scientific endeavors and research, absolutely. But I knew that that couldn't happen in the hospital setting. This is building a whole community for cancer patients and all the activities that have to go on there. So I decided to leave. And it was very hard
So you decided to leave your formal position.
I did. I left
in
academia.
the acute care setting.
I left academia. I left the hospital, and I decided to do this.
Now that's real passion.
It was
That's real
passion because there was an accusation that I was leaving for something fuzzy that wasn't very clear, and we didn't have research to support that kind of action.
But that's going with your gut.
Well, I mean, if you've been a cancer patient, you know, you sort of get a very good education about what's going on.
But that so just to tell us again where this was in the evolution of these wellness communities, you went out to California to learn about it, to experience it, and to realize there's got to be something real to this. I'm feeling like so much better.
Right.
But it wasn't really established in the Philadelphia area
Not at
yet.
all.
And what era are we talking about?
We're talking the early 90s.
Okay, that's not that terribly long ago.
No, it wasn't. And you know, we were the 10th wellness community to open. Today there are 50 some odd, and some international wellness communities as well. But we were the 10th. And the founder, Harold Benjamin, was living in Santa Monica, but he was a Philadelphia native. And you can only imagine the joy and the thrill that finally Philadelphia, it was hard. That was West Coast thinking, groups getting together and talking about, and you know, it spread across the country.
Right.
So Baltimore opened right before us, and we were the first two East Coast wellness communities, because it was a hard concept for people in the East to.
But you were a catalyst to all of that. I mean, had you not gone out there, Philadelphia might have been much later on that evolutionary curve.
I don't know. It's hard to, I mean, somebody else could have had the idea, but because I had the professional background, I thought I sort of had a leg up that I knew pretty much how I wanted the programming to go.
Interesting. So then what happened? You came, you went west, then you came back east, and then what happened?
Well, then there were two nurse friends. At the same time, we were looking in the School of Nursing about how to demonstrate nursing leadership. And so there's wonderful things going on over at the hospital. We had colleagues that were going to other universities, to other clinical settings, and but there really wasn't anybody that was really taking on the task of developing a brand new organization in the community.
Well, that's a big undertaking.
Well, yeah, but I was very naive. I thought, I know more about cancer than anybody because I've had it, I've taught about it. You know, I had good friends at Penn who could help me in terms of getting the right referrals and all of that.
Well, you know, maybe that wasn't naive. Maybe that's better labeled as optimistic. You were very optimistic about your ability as a nurse leader to make this happen.
I do. You know, on the Myers-Briggs, people don't know about that. It's a personality inventory. I do fall into the most optimistic category.
Should we be surprised?
So there is something about that. I think you're right, Nancy. So there were two nurses that I knew very well, nursing colleagues, and I brought this idea home to them, and they said yes. They wanted to help. And so one had very good connections through her husband in the community, and the other said, okay, Connie, if you'll do all the operations, I'll be the chairman of the board.
Wonderful.
So that we were three nurses that did this, and then we said, okay, so how do we form a board? I took some classes in fundraising and all of that, and I said, how hard can it be? Well, that was where I was exceedingly naive, because it was very, very difficult. So I had to gather. Women in particular were the ones that really helped me the most. The women on the mainline area, and the women in Philadelphia really had a lot of experience with fundraising because of their association in Junior League and other nonprofits.
Well, that's a great skill set to have, and what better use than to do something that's brand new. And were many of them also involved with cancer survivorship, either personally or through their families? Were they motivated that way as well?
Absolutely. I would say almost all of them had a personal experience with cancer.
I see.
Many of them family members, and were just absolutely devastated by the loss and wanted to do something. And it's so therapeutic to put that energy to some good work and to remember. I mean, we had people, we had just had people doing phenomenal things, and they continue to do it. To this day, even though the organization has evolved and it's a very different kind of place now. Some of the basic tenets still are operationalized, but as times change,
it's evolved.
It's evolving. Yeah.
So once you got it established, I mean, that means you had to have a place to go.
We did.
And where was that?
It was in a little basement apartment, not even an apartment, it was a basement dwelling under a furniture store on City Line Avenue.
Not exactly glamorous.
It wasn't, but there was a bus stop.
That's important, transportation.
Right there, and I didn't want this to be an organization for privileged people. I wanted this to be an organization for the people of Philadelphia.
Anyone.
Because anybody who has cancer has the same mountains to climb.
Right.
And I want to tell you something, that we were only there for a few years, and I'll get to my story, but when we left that place, patients said that they felt that they were leaving a sacred place.
That's beautiful.
Because of what was going on there. So slowly we began to attract different people to the board. It's constantly being out there. That was the part I didn't understand. I had very good friends in the School of Medicine that got me to a wonderful donor, Leonard Abramson, who gave me the seed money to start the wellness community.
That's great.
And we took the risks and we did it. And our dream was always to have a house, a beautiful house, because the first wellness community in Santa Monica was in a little yellow house. Mm-hmm. And we said, while it could be sacred space in a basement, I mean, it would be very nice. So
it could also be sacred in a house, too.
Absolutely. Right? I had this picture of a house on an easel in the wellness community. And one day, a young man came down, and he introduced himself. And he had been sending me checks every year. But I didn't know why he was doing that. And then when we started to dream about having a different space, he had a big office building. And so I had called him to find maybe we could move into that office building, because we were beginning to be a little successful. By the way, we never charge patients for any of the services. So he came down and he said, "What goes on here?" And he saw the picture of this house. And I said, yes, eventually we want to, and it was a colonial styled house. And so 2 days later he called and he said, "I have talked to my brothers and I've talked to my father, and we want to get going on getting you a house, and we want to name it in honor of his mother, Suzanne Morgan," and that was Keith Morgan. And it was sort of like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't talk. I had to put the phone down because I was crying, he was crying, you know. It was just such a wonderful thing.
Right.
So we got this beautiful historic house in Fairmount Park.
Oh, it sounds fabulous.
Somebody said, "Why don't you go down and talk to the Historical Commission?" So we did. You know, who knew about commissions, blueprints, how you have to honor all of the historic traditions, because if you're going to change anything on a historic house, because that house was in a land grant in the 1700s, so you know, you have to go through art commissions and historic commissions.
That must have been a real chore.
Well, it was a real learning experience,
right.
But it was wonderful.
I just want to mention to our viewers that, you know, Connie having that picture hanging up in the basement of her first operation is a really good lesson, because there are people that believe that if you really want something, you have to do just that. You have to envision it, have pictures, really focus, and in this case, this is a wonderful story about how it then came to you. You didn't have to go out and get it. It came to you.
It did, and it felt like a miracle. But Nancy, remember, I'm a clinician. And yes, I could do these things, but I was just itching to get back to clinical practice. So I had talked to the founder, Harold Benjamin, and I said, you know, I don't want to be the executive director. I want to be the program director. And he said, it's too late. You can't. You were the founder, you're the executive director, and it has to be that way. And he really, really had a thing about people switching roles, because he thought it was too dangerous, because people had gotten to know me in that role.
And they trusted you.
And they trusted me in that role, and it was very important for fundraising. So we moved into the house, and I felt that the work that I could do was done. Because when you establish new organizations like this, a new nonprofit, you really have to get to a place where you turn away from passion and mission to the business model. And the business model was not my forte. And I was getting restless that I needed to get back to clinical practice.
Right.
And I do think that founders have a way of prolonging their stay. You know,
and how many years were you involved as the founder?
I was there as the executive director for 7 years.
Well, that's a very respectable period of time.
And I didn't feel like I was abandoning or
Right,
running out,
right.
but it was about as much as I had to offer. I really felt that I had done what I needed to do. And then these wonderful young people that started getting involved with the wellness community, who were so much smarter and so much more able to take it to that next level. And to just finish the story, the reason why we have so many wellness communities, and now called community support, cancer support community, is because Gilda Radner's husband, oh gosh, his name just went out of my head, wanted
the actor,
right. Wanted an organization named for her. But it was exactly a wellness community, because that's where she had gone. So we had this split, Gilda's Club and the wellness community. But in the last few years, those have come together.
Well, that's good.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
That's wonderful.
That's great. Well, I mean, and your point about, being the trailblazer, which really, you really did blaze the trail from California back to Philadelphia and then some. And then there are people that are really good at maintaining, really taking something, from that point on. But in terms of finishing our story, because obviously there are many chapters to this beautiful story, what are the services that people that are listening to this can get from these wellness centers that you have now established? Just give us sort of an example.
The educational programs are phenomenal, because they bring in all the experts. So if you have lung cancer, they bring in lung cancer experts. They bring in breast cancer, all of the diagnoses. Okay, so it's educational. There are computers and help to get people online so that they can get the information that they need. There are courses in nutrition. A real serious focus on being well, not being sick. And
Right.
what does it take to
Right,
be well?
right.
So you transition from being a cancer patient to being a person who has cancer.
Right, and can really take it to another level of quality of life.
Absolutely.
Now-
And then, of course, the granddaddy of all of the activities are the support groups.
Right, so you can
So
get
you have newcomer support groups, you've got ongoing support groups, you've got newly diagnosed groups, you've got people with advanced stage cancers, all meeting and telling those stories that I was talking about initially.
Right. So I think for our viewers, again, no one really needs to really struggle with this by themselves. But, thanks to Connie and many other people that worked with her that really got this established. I think in closing, how are they going to find it?
Oh, it's right off of Belmont Avenue. It's in Fairmount Park. And you go down Shimoni. And if you just turn left off of Belmont onto Shimoni, and you'll find a great big sign out front that says the Cancer Support Community. And you call 215, we'll get that information, and they have orientation groups.
Good.
And they
so
invite
people
you.
could find it online.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so
just
they
go to the Cancer Support Community of Philadelphia, and it's there.
And voila, you'll be there. And we want to thank you so much, Connie, for telling us about not just the history, but the tremendous bravado that you had to have in making this happen. And the fact that it has not only moved on and grown, but that she has left her own legacy along with Dean Claire Fagan in really that moment of truth when you really say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to make a difference. Thank you again for being with us, and thank you very much for being with us for this show. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation today and that the information will help you in meeting your health goals. Catch this program and other conversations on the website, drnancyrn.com. Or you can write to me as well. I welcome your comments and feedback. Thank you for listening and join us again. And remember, with health, all things are possible.